Welcome, Sue Moran, Chair of the Board of Selectmen for Falmouth, and we're starting our State of the Town address today with Selectwoman Megan English Braga, along with Michael Kasparian, who's President of the Falmouth Chamber. Welcome, both of you, and I appreciate you coming. We're going to be, in terms of the Selectmen, doing a State of the Town address periodically, and we thought the most important thing to do this week was to have a conversation with you, Michael, about things that are important to the business community, and most particularly the incident that happened with the folks walking along the road, the tragic accident, and really safety issues in terms of people biking to work, what the business community would like to see in terms of safety.
Sure, great. Well, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. So, I mean, that's a good point because, you know, with the Chamber, from the Chamber of Commerce, a lot of people don't understand, and what I like to do is try to explain the Chamber as being a stool with three legs, and one leg being tourism, of course, which is so important to us in Falmouth, the second leg being business, but the third and probably most important legs being community, and what the Chamber can do to support the community, because what's good for the community is good for business and tourism. And that's a great example, the bicycle accident, because that really affected the whole community, and they were J1 students who were here for the tourism season working in businesses. So it's all really connected and tied in together. It really was a tragic accident, and I have to tell you, I think part of the issue is that people are just not aware of the rules. And I almost scared myself, or I did scare myself, and nearly ran a biker off the road on the way here today. I was coming down Gifford to take a left onto Dillingham, and somebody was coming down the road on the bicycle on the opposite side. And so when I took a left, he came out in front of me. Fortunately, I didn't hit him, but then I said to myself after I was done, do you ride with the traffic or against the traffic? And I have to admit, I'm ignorant of that myself.
Well, that's part of the initiative, because Nell Fields started thinking big with respect to this tragic accident, and thinking it's really information that a lot of folks could use. And she, Megan English Braga, and myself started getting together in terms of looking at resources in the town, and how can we best put together an informational source that would intersect with available information from the county, from the town, and the use of experts. And I know, Megan, you've been in discussions with the Chief of Police and also with the Chamber.
Yes, and also with the Bikeways Committee, who this is of particular interest to them. Part of their charge or their mandate is to really focus on not only promoting cycling, but also really promoting that education, exactly what you're talking about, Michael, for folks to understand how to safely traverse through our town on bicycles, for drivers to understand some of those rules of the road as well. So one of the long-term ideas that we've discussed is, certainly it wouldn't be feasible for this year, but, in coming years, having some kind of perhaps welcoming packet for some of these workers who come that may have some of that information, easy to understand, because obviously we have a wonderfully diverse population from all over the world who come here. So something that would be kind of simple for folks to understand about, being on the side of the road you're supposed to be on, the availability of vests, reflective vests, and bicycle lights, which the police department does have, or they have the bicycle lights and they've handed those out in the past, and whatever other resources we can marshal in the coming year to really welcome those workers. We want, and I'm sure the Chamber shares this feeling, we really want those workers to have a great experience.
Absolutely.
And either come back or go back to their home country and say this is a wonderful place to spend the summer, to meet friends, to make some money, make connections, because we certainly depend on those individuals, not just for our economy, but it really enriches. It's a wonderful thing in the summer to suddenly see this very young, very diverse population come into the community. So Bikeways Committee, hopefully the Chamber, Chief of Police, and the Board of Selectmen, I think, are going to, over the coming year, maybe work on something like that to really help welcome those workers and address the safety issues, but in a broader sense, address the issue of just really promoting welcoming those workers into our community for the time they're here.
I like the way you put that, because when you think about yourself, if you were in the position where you were traveling to a foreign country, that would be one of the first things that would be helpful to know. And so I think that the initiative in terms of the faith community, the county, the town, and the Chamber getting together to make this part of really the future welcoming packet for the town, I think makes a lot of sense. And unfortunately, came out of a very tragic situation. But hopefully we'll be able to present it in the past. And it's something the police have always been aware of, but I think you can always use more help.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, and
Yeah.
I think that and maybe you can speak to this, I think the chamber is really uniquely situated to connect with these workers through their places of employment in a way that, despite all of the best efforts, the police department isn't, because that's not their charge. And so I think that collaboration is something that's really, I think, exciting.
And that's the key word, really, is the collaboration. I think whenever we're working with the town, the selectman's office, or the police department, it's great because we can get the word out. And individually, different companies and employers have been working hard. Like Stop and Shop, for example, does a bicycle training for their J1 workers. And so they're kind of ahead of the curve. So that would be a great resource to bring in and have them kind of help us out. And of course, the Bikeways Committee, as you were talking about. But it is really important to make the town safe and to educate everyone. But drivers as well, like I was saying. I was like, wow. I scared myself. I was thinking about that. But
well, and it's a promotional opportunity for the businesses, because when you look at how you care for your workers, it makes the consumers appreciate the fact that you care for your workers, you care for your business,
right.
And I think that's an opportunity for businesses to showcase what they do.
And not only that, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if we could get more residents to use bicycles to help with the congestion, and maybe do like a hub, the hub bicycle, the hub-way they have up in Boston, and do something like that to get more people biking to work, and just make it something that's safer for everyone.
We just had the governor and lieutenant governor down opening up the lower part of the bike path, and in fact Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito is still on the Cape, and really has asked about the Falmouth in particular, and in fact made a specific inquiry with respect to the recent flood, so that it's something that the state is also very cognizant of and promoting, in terms of green living, and really keeping our carbon footprint down. I think when the state does roads and as Falmouth develops and upgrades, bike path is thought of more and more, and it makes complete sense.
And then I know that we just had an update from the Bikeways Committee, and the complete streets plans from the state, which really does focus on looking at increasing that bicycle use, and our DPW has really been very responsive and has worked very hard to, as we redesign parts of the town, to try to put in some of those bike lanes where you can, narrow the street so there's a larger shoulder where you can. So that continues to go on, which really does, as you're noting, it really does benefit all of us, all year-round residents as well. But we certainly have, I think, just a lot of opportunity to sort of bring all of these pieces together at once. And again, as you said, it comes out of a very tragic event, but it's long overdue in many ways, and unfortunately sometimes it's those events that spur these things forward.
Absolutely, and I think the last thing I want to mention for folks listening is that the Board of Selectmen is also going to do an informational presentation and gather resources. That the county has a presentation with lights, and they're very cognizant of this issue across the Cape, and they're going to come along with a representative from the regional transport. Tom Cahere has been working on this issue as well, and hopefully the chief of police and Michael, if you're available, we're looking at dates to look at all of our resources, just so folks know what is available, and as we marshal all of these assets that we have and develop programs for next year, we can start right now.
And as Megan mentioned, we are uniquely situated, I think, to get out to the business community as well as to the regular population and visitors as well. But back to your original comment too, I mean, what Nell has done really in spearheading this thing has been amazing.
And Elias Lieberman, and the faith community.
The faith community has really come out, and the amount of money and checks that have come in, because the chamber was a drop-off point. I can't tell you how much support has come through. It's really been amazing. So
just for folks who don't realize, because I know we touched on it, Nell and Elias and a number of other individuals in the faith community were doing the fundraising for these individuals who were involved in this accident. So
through No Place for Hate.
Through No Place for Hate, to take care of some of the lost wages, some of the other expenses. So it's really, not. It's always heartening, although not surprising, because this community is so generous in so many ways.
Yes.
But I think people have been really touched by this. I think anyone who particularly has children, you think about your young teenage or a young adult being abroad somewhere in another country and having something like this happen. And just to know that this community has really come together to support these young folks is wonderful.
Yeah.
So
Another reason why Falmouth's so special.
yes,
You know,
Absolutely.
really just amazing.
Thank you, Michael Kasparian.
My pleasure.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
yeah,
much.
my pleasure. We look forward to working with you on this, and you know, hopefully it'll be very successful. I'm sure it will.
Thanks a lot. Just one of many projects we do with the Chamber, and we really appreciate you being there every time.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, again, Sue Moran, the chair of the Falmouth Board of Selectmen. I want to thank Michael Kasparian, the president of the Falmouth,
Chamber of
Commerce, sorry, for joining us. I also, of course, have the vice chair, Megan English Braga, with me, and we're continuing with the state of the town discussion. You can expect it probably quarterly. We're looking at trying to do this just so folks who don't have a chance to watch the meetings every week can take a look and get a summary of the more important issues. One of the things, Megan, I think that it would be important for folks to know is that in the strategic planning meeting of this new session of the board, we really talked about a lot of efficiency in terms of more access, being very respectful of our guest times, people that come to speak before selectmen, and also really starting with the foundation, which I think is our committees and committee reports.
Right. And I think one of the things that we really focused on was the fact that the largest criticism, if you will, or critique that you hear from folks is that there isn't enough collaboration, that we have all of these incredibly dedicated town employees or volunteer committee members who, the volunteers, the folks who join these committees, give an enormous amount of time and energy and bring such a wealth of experience to their positions, and that we don't get the maximum benefit of that because sometimes we find that we are working kind of independently in our separate sort of silos, if you will. And so the goal of trying to break down those silos a bit and connect people, and it's something that we talked about last year at our strategic planning meeting, and we continue to focus on it. And I think one of the things that's already started in the last couple of months is something that had been done in the past, which is bringing those committees back in front of the board, inviting them to give a report about important matters that they're dealing with, their vision in the coming months, any thoughts or input that they'd like from the board. And I think it's critical that we do that because we need to have all of that work connected. And certainly for the board and the public to be able to hear about what the committees are doing on a regular basis, rather than just say when a vote comes on a particular issue that might come out of that committee. We can see the process. The board can ask questions and just be more fully informed, as can the public. When they see these things on the agenda, they can either watch or attend. And so that's something that's already started that I think is really part of that communication, that connection that the board has talked about at their strategic planning.
Absolutely. We it's the foundation of Falmouth government is our, brain trust of committees. And it not only informs the board and the public when they come and give reports, but I think it really brings the process together with the Board of Selectmen. So when the committees have a task that is either directly given by the Board of Selectmen or their own initiative, they then have the opportunity to really fully present as it is growing and as their recommendations are coming together. And then the board, I think, really can delve into, ask questions, get a better understanding, and then actually use the suggestions or the initiatives that the committees put forth. Because, I think there's been a frustration in the past that committees have worked hard on their various initiatives, and then just the way sometimes happens with studies or other processes that the town is moving with, but there's a change in priority, and that suggestion or that work kind of sits on a shelf for a while, or it doesn't really get integrated into the Board of Selectmen process. So this board at the strategic planning meeting really was very clear that from this point we're going to be getting together on this and really using those resources a little bit better. And certainly it is a continuing issue. We probably do have too many committees. We probably could, hone them a little bit and have a review, and that's one thing I think we need to continue to work on. But with respect to getting volunteers, we've actually done a good job already this year in kind of instigating more civil interest. And I know that you've done a lot of that work with the community and getting that interest sparked.
And I think from where we were last year, when you looked at the list of openings on committees, where it was 3, 4 openings, I mean, the affirmative action committee couldn't even meet because they didn't have a quorum, and that had been that way for quite a while. It is now a fully staffed committee that is looking at some really exciting work coming up. And so and that is really across the board. A lot of the openings in the committees have now been filled, and we find ourselves really in a tough position often of picking between, many extremely qualified, passionate individuals who apply for these committees, rather than having one person and there's still 3 more open seats.
A good problem to have,
yeah,
right?
we'll take it. I mean, I
Right.
think that piece is, is something that you can really measure and see even within a short period of time. And part of that is just promoting it and making sure we're telling people over and over again, these are the things that you can get involved in. These are the committees that are out there. And just to speak to your point about, going back to that being the foundation, that idea of civic engagement and transparency and people being part of the process is really the foundation of, it should be the foundation of all government, but particularly of a smaller, small town government, because the impacts of decisions are felt, I think, very personally and close, just in a way that it isn't necessarily at the federal level, sometimes even at the state level. So the more voices we hear, whether it's people being on committees or attending committee meetings or Board of Selectmen meetings or sending emails. I mean, the volume of email that we get is enormous.
Much bigger now.
Yes, much
Right.
bigger. And that's a good thing. The more input that we get, that's a positive thing.
Well, and we need it, because when folks are familiar with the issues and that communication has gone on throughout the process, it really helps selectmen in putting forth and being successful with the initiatives that the community has asked for. And, there are times when we haven't done a great job of that, and we really learn from that experience and we try to do better next time. I think that, again, communication is key, and that brings me to another of the initiatives that came out of this strategic planning meeting, and that's really the broadening of the town manager's report for both the benefit of selectmen and the public. And I thought that Julian Suso, the town manager, did a terrific job this past Monday meeting, when he not only discussed a few things that he had attended during the week in terms of public events, but he also really delved into some questions from the community, some serious issues, the flooding that occurred, the fire at Quicks Hole that Beth Colt was, really appreciative of the town. Mr. Suso was there on Sunday morning checking out all
Goodwill
of the
Park.
Goodwill Park is another one. So I really think that is going to be a terrific resource going forward.
I agree, and I think sometimes, certainly the sheer volume of issues on a daily basis, the town manager, the board, our department heads, they are sometimes, quite often, in crisis mode, because things happen. You have terrible accidents, you have natural disasters or unexpected things like the flooding of last week, and everything shifts to focus on that.
Right.
And so when we can use his report to then talk about the other things that he's been able to do, it's always the big press things that people hear about, and sometimes the fact that he was at Goodwill Park for a couple of hours to just monitor and see what was going on for himself, so he didn't have to rely on other reports, or the fact that you got back directly to some concerned citizens over the weekend. I mean, those are the types of things that I think people really appreciate.
Or that you had a meeting in your office.
Yeah,
exactly.
Those are the kind of things that people appreciate, and it's those don't always make the headlines or get into the news, and it's not that you want that for any kind of self gratification, but it's so that people understand that that their leadership are accessible in that way, and that that's the appropriate role for them.
And working hard at it, as as folks deserve. I mean, in terms of the the consideration, not only just in making sure the information is out there in various modes, but for example, respect for people's time. Doug Brown made the suggestion that we really should consider putting the approval of minutes at the end, because that would have the effect of bringing the rest of the agenda forward earlier, so that folks that were sitting in the office, whether they're waiting to be appointed to a committee or they have an issue, sign request or any other request, that will expedite their their time, and it's a better customer service experience.
Right.
And I think that that's the other thing. I'm really proud of this board, in terms of the focus. Certainly Sam Patterson is just tireless in his committee work. Former chair Doug Jones is just, always, has a lot of strengths, is out there in the community, but it is really terrific at overseeing, the numbers and looking at, what the impacts of certain requests are down the line. So, I think that, that's the other thing that, I want to make sure folks hear, is that all five of us are very focused and care a lot about customer service, and we're not only are we taking suggestions, whether it's in a chance meeting or an email, but we're thinking about it, amongst ourselves. And I think that that attention and concern for the community has made a big difference in a very different way of looking at the long-term issue of the turbines. And I think that without the strength and vision of this particular board, that we would not have been able to make some of the difficult decisions. The first of which is not to appeal this decision by Judge Moriarty.
Yep.
Right, sorry.
I think that your point is well taken. That I think each member of the board, and maybe this is the wisdom, I'm guessing, of the voters. Each board member, I think, brings something different to it, a different perspective, or just a different way of problem solving and looking at things. I think that Doug Brown, who is the newest member, is really out there in the community. He is not at all afraid to meet with people who have vastly different views from him, and to really hear from them and have that exchange of ideas. He did that quite a bit around the senior center project.
Right.
And so I think all of those different kind of strengths and problem solving styles were brought to bear for the issue of the turbines. And certainly it's been an issue that went on long before any of the current members were there. It's, there are viewpoints across the spectrum. There are folks who are very pleased with this decision. There are folks who are certainly very disappointed. And I think that everyone on the board can kind of see how both of those types of opinions could come to be from the same singular
well, it's
set of
also
events.
within the board. We all think differently.
Yes, but I think to weigh at the end of the day, I think that the board had to really weigh what's best for the community as a whole, bearing in mind that there are many moving parts. And I think that it was, to me, a very productive debate, conversation, and an exchange of ideas. And at the end of the day, there is no easy answer for an issue like the turbines in this town. There's no answer that's going to, resolve all of the possible challenges or make everyone happy. But at some point, a decision has to be made so a town can move forward. And I think that that's what this, the most recent decision hopefully will do. Albeit there are challenges that are still out there for us.
Absolutely, and we're taking advantage of every single resource. Our legislators, as you know, are working very closely with you and I and the rest of the board, and with the staff, and that's what I think the taxpayers are entitled to. So I'm very pleased that we've been able to garner a lot of support at this point in time, and just for other very difficult issues that this going on with the senior center, we're really kind of trying to expedite the process because of it's the efficiencies, the eventual cost savings,
Right.
and also for the community in terms of the seniors waiting so long for the project.
Right.
And so that'll be, I think, the next thing in terms of a little ingenuity that this board is pressing for with respect to the staff.
Correct. And I think, when the town, to me, when town meeting takes a vote, that is important. When the town takes a vote, that's important. And from my perspective, it's the responsibility and the job of the Board of Selectmen to adhere as closely as possible to whatever that vote is and what the will of our voters, whatever that message is to us. And with the senior center, it's that we try to stay on budget. We gave a number. That's a number, and all those things you're talking about. The sooner you can do it, the closer you are to having the correct numbers for any project. The sooner you are to getting that project off the ground for the users who have been promised a space to enjoy, their activities. And just going back briefly to the turbine issue, again, we had a vote. We've had complicated legal battles, and we're trying to do our best to really, I think, adhere to the will of the voters, which was really focusing on financial impact when they took the vote around that question.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to minimize that as best as possible in a very difficult situation, while still also trying to remain committed to clean, renewable energy, because it's not only good stewardship, but it's certainly, I think, a bedrock foundation of this community that has been on the cutting edge of really green energy in many ways.
That's right, and recognizing the different situation. I mean, it's 4 years later of a really 7+ year legal battle, and a lot of things have changed. So, while respecting, all of that information and the votes, we are in a different position. Yes. And, I think that this board is, brave enough really to look at and really turn the prism around every way, and to look at all of the changed situations, the decisions that we do have, and to look at handling it in a global fashion as best we can.
And I think to us, ask tough questions of our experts, our council, our staff, and I think of each other, to ask really tough questions. What if this worst case scenario occurs, or what if we take path A? Mm-hmm. And I think that's again what you're required to do, because we're trying to fulfill whatever the voters have asked for, and that is true no matter what project or undertaking that the town engages in. And I think if we don't, you run the risk of voters really just becoming disenfranchised from town government and saying it doesn't really matter. And you always have that. You always have those rumblings of folks who say, it doesn't matter, I never, the government doesn't do anything for me. But I think if you, really dig deeper, we have a very connected community who gives input in lots of different ways, whether it's sort of informally through social media, coming to meetings, letters in the enterprise. And so I think we want to continue to make sure people feel that their voice and their opinion and their vote really matters. And I know that that's important to this board, and that it really supports a lot of what we do going forward.
And that makes for the best projects, because you take in other folks' views, and you might not have thought about it in that way. And the more we have community outreach, the more we invite our committees in, our people who are working on initiatives, I think will be better and better, and there'll be a better result for the community.
And just on those lines, I think it's really important. I know sometimes we take it for granted that people recognize this, but that everyone understands that the meetings for Board of Selectmen are posted. The public is always welcome, other than if it's an executive session, and that's quite rare, in terms of the number of times that we meet.
Yes.
Committee meetings are all of them are open to the public, so you may not be a committee member, but you can come to any of those meetings. And that certainly, input. There's time during Board of Selectmen meetings for comments on whatever's on the agenda. There's time for public comment on things that aren't on the agenda. If something's really important to someone and they feel that needs to be brought to the attention of the board and the town. So there are so many ways for people to communicate with government that don't have to be joining a committee. I mean, people shouldn't think that if you aren't a member of one of these committees or a board, that you don't have input. You absolutely do, and all of these things are open. So for, I challenge folks who, grumble about not having any input all you have to do is get yourself over, and everybody's absolutely super busy. We totally get it. But, you know, a lot of these meetings happen once a month for the committees. So if there's an issue you really care about, you know, something that's happening right now that's really wonderful is the Falmouth Substance Abuse Commission is really revisiting its structure and looking at a way to perhaps not rebrand, but rework what it's doing and retool its mission to be more responsive to the current substance abuse crisis.
So important
And
right
that's
now.
something that so many people in our community have been touched by and have really important perspectives on. And those meetings are open. And this is a time to be part of that process and to share those thoughts. And again, it might just mean you go to one of the meetings. So there's so many ways, I think, to be involved, that people need to be reminded that if you're unhappy about something, make your voice heard in one of these ways. It's far more effective. Social media is wonderful, but it's far more effective to go to a committee meeting, to go to a Board of Selectmen meeting and say, this is what I'm concerned about.
Sure, and you might learn something. And if, you know, as you're thinking about it, that one way to just kind of step off and to really get started, come into into town hall. There's a woman there who knows most of the schedules and can give you the information. Town clerk is right behind her. You can also go straight to the selectman's office. If there is a concern, the secretaries
Amazing.
they can give you the application you might need. They can tell you the meeting to go to. They can walk you through the steps of if you have a concern or if you have something that you want to get done, whether you need a permit, whether you don't. They're there to serve the customer, who is the taxpayer, and they're very welcoming, and they will walk you through the steps and get you where you're going. Either Carol or Diane come right into the selectman's office, and Julian Suso, the town manager, is there, along with Peter Johnson-Staub, the assistant town manager, and they'll help you right away. So people should know it's your town hall. Come on in.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
This
thank
is a
you. It's
great
exciting
discussion.
Exciting to start, and I think really to continue on that process of, again, sharing that information with the public in a timely manner.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Have a great day.